US says it will give the green light to sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine as soon as its pilots are trained. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has made that comment in letters to European allies, but on Wednesday, Ukraine made it clear it does not expect to actually get those jets until next year. Its pilots haven't started their training in Europe, and it's unclear how long that training will last. As Nick Payton-Walsh explains, transferring those planes is no simple task.
Getting Ukraine's F-16s was always going to be an ambitious, complex task. You have to provide technicians inside Ukraine who are Ukrainian to do the vast amounts of servicing that these complex jets need between their flights to keep them operational. You need to train in English F-16 pilots. That training project was supposed to happen in NATO European ally nations. The program for it was complex. It didn't move as fast forward as people had necessarily hoped. So the initial ambition from the Biden administration to see F-16s flying in Ukraine by the end of the year clearly has been stalled, and that's been recognised by Ukrainian officials in the last hours here. It's a huge deal, really, for Ukraine, because while they wouldn't really necessarily impact the frequency of sirens that you hear in a population centre like this, that's mostly because of long-distance missile attacks, they could have a big impact on the southern counter-offensive front line, where Russia has air superiority, and the half-metric-ton bombs that the Russians drop on Ukrainian positions have been slowing that offensive and causing enormous casualties. So the F-16s were a chance of Ukraine redressing that balance. The idea it could happen this year, it's fair to say that was ambitious. The fact that it's not happening, well, possibly that's a reflection of how long these tasks have been taking inside of NATO itself. We've seen ourselves when we're on the outskirts of Urozhaine, the town most recently captured by Ukraine, how important air superiority could be for Ukraine to push the Russians back, to speed up that particular advance. Urozhaine important, certainly, because it enabled them to keep moving south. At the same time, we've also been hearing from Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko talking about how they will not attack Ukraine, and if they were attacked, they could potentially resort to nuclear weapons. Important to put that in context. Belarus has already been used for the invasion of Ukraine last year. Belarus doesn't have its own separate nuclear arsenal. It relies on Russia for that, and so Lukashenko often making these statements to suggest they don't really want to be part of this war, but they shouldn't necessarily be considered to be weak at this stage. He enjoys minimal domestic support, but was seminal to Putin in turning around the Wagner coup a few months ago. But still, a deeply complex day for Ukraine, where the thought of F-16s being delayed will be poorly accepted by so many here. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Dnipro, Ukraine.
The head of NATO is doing some damage control, meanwhile, after controversial remarks by his office director earlier this week. Secretary Jens Stoltenberg stressed on Thursday that only Ukraine can decide when to hold talks with Russia to end the war. That clarification necessary after one of his top aides said Ukraine ceding territory to Russia could be one way for Kyiv to achieve peace and join NATO. The Secretary General now saying, quote, "What is important is that the Ukrainians themselves must decide when they are willing to sit down at the negotiating table." The initial remark about ceding territory drew criticism from Ukraine as well, unsurprisingly. A top advisor to President Zelensky called the idea ridiculous and warned that if Vladimir Putin does not suffer a crushing defeat, Russia would be emboldened to act the same way again. Now, for more on this, let's bring in Mick Ryan. He's a retired Army Major General and in the Australian Army, and the author of War Transformed, The Future of 21st Century Great Power Competition and Conflict. He joins me now from Canberra. Always good to see you, Mick. Jens Stoltenberg essentially, as we saw, walking back those comments from his own office. So what did you make of that coming from Stoltenberg's office in the first place, potentially damaging?
Well, g'day, Michael. It's good to be with you again. I was surprised initially. I mean, Stoltenberg has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine throughout the war, and these kind of comments haven't passed his lips, certainly. So, they're not good and not productive comments, but he'll be minimising the damage, and potentially that office director may be finding other employment elsewhere in the near future.
Yeah, I guess when you look at the potential harm to the overall arc of the conflict. I mean, do those comments, just by being raised, risk inserting, a splinter into the broader unity conversation?
Well, I think they do. Certainly for a NATO that has been remarkably unified and focused on supporting Ukraine, their Vilnius communique was very clear on this. It certainly provides a wedge for Russia in its misinformation operations. Whether it's a reality or not, it will seek to wedge any disunity. Finally, it's a real distraction for the Ukrainian leadership. They are very, very busy indeed, fighting a war, defending their country, and these kind of things really aren't productive for them.
Yeah. Okay, so when it comes to the substance of those comments, what might a peace deal look like? I mean, most or many resolutions of war end up with some level of compromise, but Zelensky has repeatedly said not an inch of Ukrainian soil would be given up.
Well, it's hard to see either side compromising at the moment. Certainly after Bucha, a peace deal looks like Russia out of all of Ukraine, including Crimea. A peace deal for Russia looks like them retaining what they have. There's a massive gap in between there, and at least until the Ukrainian presidential elections are over, it's very difficult to see compromise.
Stoltenberg also spoke about the threats to smaller neighbours of Russia. I'll just read what he said. He said, small countries like Latvia and Lithuania cannot accept that because they are small neighbouring countries, then Russia shall rule over them. I mean, that was important clarification that he made. Do you think it was related to that initial comment out of his office, a reassurance? I mean, having to make clear NATO's positions on those other neighbours?
I think it's absolutely related to those comments. Those eastern countries, not just in the Baltics, but countries like Poland, would have thought, well, if parts of Ukraine can be given up to appease Russia, why wouldn't parts of our nations? So I'd suggest the NATO Secretary General's probably spent a lot of time, and probably has a lot more time to spend in the near future, reassuring Eastern European NATO allies.
I wanted to ask you too, before we let you go, when you look at advances, incremental as they are in the south, around places perhaps like Robotyne, do you see a real chance Ukraine could cut off Russia's land bridge, and what impact would that have on the war?
Well, I think there's certainly a good chance. The Russians are under a lot of pressure. We're seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence of this. But that doesn't take away the fact that this has been an extraordinarily tough fight, a very bloody fight for the Ukrainians. But they're determined, and I think they should be able to do that in this fighting season.
Major General Mick Ryan, always a pleasure, sir. Good to see you, Mick. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.